Hello everyone and welcome to this session. I'm glad to greet you on Festive Tech Calendar session for Santa's Festive Guide to Entra ID Security Defaults. Before kicking off the session, I want to say thank you for organizers of this Festive Tech Calendar event, especially Azure Greg, the Richard, and anyone else in Cloud Family team who is helping to organize this awesome event. I hope you are enjoying the rest of the sessions. Please check my description of the YouTube channel, and I will have a link to the Festive Tech Calendar remaining sessions so you can enjoy them as well. So in this session, we'll have this a perfect journey for IT administrators, security professionals, and anyone eager to unwrap the secrets of Entra ID, especially the default Entra ID security settings that you need to have in place. And any prior experience with Entra ID is would be actually helpful, but it is not required. So let's dive into this session without any overdue and learn about how you can adjust your security default options with Microsoft Entra ID. And if you are not familiar with Microsoft Entra ID, it's a rename of the Microsoft Azure Active Directory. It has been there for a while, but if you never heard about that, Microsoft Entra ID services is for security, for identity, access, and control. Within the My name is Elhan. Again, welcome to this session. I've been MCT since last 18 years, and as well as I'm also honored to be a Microsoft Azure MVP, and really honored and humbled to be part of this great community. I'm also known as a cloud marathoner within the community and cloud community, where I encourage and post about cloud tips and bits that you can learn and help you in your cloud journey. And as well as, I'm an active core member of Cloud Launch and Learn, where we moderate and as well as organize the sessions for everybody within tech community to come share their knowledge, share their expertise, and as well as give back to the community. That's enough about myself. You are more than welcome to connect with me. I'll share my contacts here. I'm on LinkedIn. You're more than welcome to get connected with me. I'm also on GitHub, where you can get this repo of these slides and as well as the links. If you navigate to the repository here and go to the presentations and then navigate to Festive Tech Calendar here, you should be able to find the slides. So I should have already uploaded that. So you should get the slides here. In addition to that, you are more than welcome to visit Cloud Marathon blog, and as well as read other posts that I do on LinkedIn with the hashtag Cloud Marathoner. And then I will also show you some more information about where you can learn more about Microsoft Entra and as well as security defaults to enable. Okay, that said, let's go through agenda, what we are going to cover on this festive Santa's session on guiding you through Entra ID security defaults. So in this North Pole or anywhere in the world, you need to stay secure. And to stay secure means that you need to configure whatever services you have in a way that you are using the recommended options, recommended settings in place. To start with, first we'll start with what is Microsoft Entra ID security defaults and where you can find it. Then we'll look into how you can enforce those security defaults in your Microsoft Entra ID tenant. Then we'll look into different options that you have for deploying those services. Then we'll consider a demo where you will look into Entra Admin Portal and get more familiar with different settings that are on your disposal. And then we'll have a short Q&A session with the people who are on the session. But if you are watching this online, please put your comments in the channel and reach back to me, and I will be glad to guide you so you can better understand this topic. All right, without any overdue, let's kick the session. First, what are the security defaults on Entra ID? What it is? First of all, the main purpose of security defaults in Entra ID is to help protect your organization from identity-related attacks like password sprays, replay, and phishing are the common threats of today's environment. And when we say security can be difficult, yes, security is not easy. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that much, you know, uh, that much news about security breaches all around the systems, and it wouldn't be an issue. However, the the reason is simple. Security can be difficult, and getting getting your security in place based on recommended default, at least getting your security into place as a recommended solution with the Microsoft recommended settings is always going to make your life a bit easier. Next, preventing common identity related attacks. Based on Microsoft analysis, more than 99.9% of those common identity related attacks could be prevented by enabling and as well as configuring the security options in your services. Third, the basic level of security always needs to be in place, set it up to protect your system. The primary goal is to ensure that organizations have at least a basic level of security enabled at no extra cost to you. And that's what Microsoft Entra ID security defaults are providing. Next, blocking legacy authentication protocols. This is very important, and the common identity related attack that you can stop by using multi-factor authentication and blocking the legacy authentication protocols that you may have in your system. And finally, protecting privileged activities. This is another important prevention to protect the privileged activities like access to the Azure portal or giving administrative privileges to access your environment through some other command line tools like Azure CLI or PowerShell. Now let's look into who is this security defaults are intended for. What are those use cases where you should or should not enable it for your organization? First of all, in terms of enabling security defaults in your environment, I'm sharing Microsoft Entra Admin Center screenshot where you have this option where you can just switch the flip here and enable the security defaults. If your tenant was created on or after the October 2019, those security defaults might be enabled in your tenant by default. And to protect all of the users, security defaults are being rolled out to all new tenants starting from that time. So if you're just creating a new Azure tenant and you don't have any conditional access or any other settings, your default security settings would be enabled by Microsoft. Again, this setting is recommended when you don't have any conditional access policies, you don't have premium licenses like P1 or P2, and your tenant doesn't actively use any legacy authentication clients. And after these settings are enabled, all users in the organization will need to register for MFA, for multi-factor authentication, because that's something that enforced once you enable security defaults on your Entra ID tenant. Now, let's look at some details in enforcing these security defaults and when this option is switched on, what type of benefits you get out of it. So first of all, to get into those security defaults, there are certain requirements that you need to meet. As you see here on the list, we have 5 of them. And first one is the requirement for all users to register with Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication. And this is something that started and became mandatory from end of July 2024 this year. And all the new tenants may not have this 14 days of grace period for users to register for MFA. Microsoft made this change to help reduce the risk of account compromise during the 19-day window. It was pretty big window, like 2 weeks, as MFA can block over 99% of identity-based attacks. Second requirement is requiring administrators to do multi-factor authentication. One's common, and this is now a very common method to improve the protection of privileged accounts. It is required very strongly from account verification of sign-ins, like and making sure that accounts, even if they get compromised, they are not going to be breached by just plain passwords and usernames. And the recommendation is here, in order to make sure that you are not compromising accounts, recommendation is always to have a separate administrator account that's different from your standard productivity task accounts of the users. So any user should not mix and match privileged and non-privileged roles. And anytime when you have administration related roles, you need to make sure we need to make sure that MFA is going to be prompted. So after registration is finished with secure defaults, your administrator roles will be required to do multi-factor authentication every time they sign into the system. Next one is the third requirement here, and we have required users to do multi-factor authentication when necessary. And Microsoft system, in this case Microsoft Entra, will decide when a user is prompted for MFA authentication based on a number of different factors such as your device, your role, your location, and tasks. And this functionality protects all registered applications, including the SaaS applications. Next here, blocking the legacy authentication protocols. Legacy authentication is a term that refers to an authentication request made by a client that don't use modern authentication. And if you remember, or maybe some of your clients are using, you can give an example of Office 2010 client, which actually doesn't use modern authentication. And any client that uses the older mail protocols such as POP3, SMTP, or IMAP, they're also going to be blocked. Finally, the protecting privileged activities like access to the Azure portal. After you enable security defaults in your tenant, any user accessing the services such as the Azure portal itself, Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, or Microsoft Entra Admin Center, they must complete multi-factor authentication. This is for protection, and this provides one of the best protections from compromised accounts. Now let's look at deployment considerations once you check all these requirements and you want to go ahead with enabling security defaults on your Azure tenant. So the options for deployment that we have, there are 5 different considerations before doing the deployment. First one here is preparing your users, right? So communication is key here about all the upcoming changes, about registration requirements, and any necessary user actions that they need to take in place. And one of the recommended steps is to make sure that your users are prepared for this new experience and help to ensure successful rollout of the implementation. Second, authentication methods. So users might use verification codes from the apps like Microsoft Authentication app, and that's going to be a way that they can only use to register their notification options. By the way, users can also use some third-party applications that enable the OAuth OAuth time-based one-time password generation apps, or the apps that actually provide this one-time password code that could be used. Next, we have B2B users. Any B2B guest users or B2B direct connect users that access your directory are treated the same as your organization's users. Next, here we have disabled MFA status. So some of the accounts, if you already had MFA for certain users enabled, or depending if you had any conditional access-based multi-factor authentication enabled, some users may show as disabled, but that's should not basically surprise you. Disabled is an appropriate status for the users. who are using some security defaults or conditional access-based multi-factor authentication already in place. Next, we have disabling security defaults. So in the case that you need to roll out conditional access policies across your tenant, then you need to replace the security defaults on your Microsoft Entra, meaning you need to disable that. And to disable that, you would basically follow the same steps as you enable it. You would need to access the Microsoft Entra portal and uh, change the switch in the drop-down to disable state. Okay, that's it. Now let's look at the chart where we can much easier compare the functionality and as well as what's required for conditional access and as well as for the Microsoft Entra Security default options. Let's look at that. So this is the basically a table or chart where you can compare that. And as you see, while security defaults are good baseline to start your security posture from, they do not allow for the customization that many organizations actually require to operate. Conditional access policies provide a full range of customization that more complex organizations do require. And while you are looking at this, comparison, I want to mention that one of the very critical recommendations from Microsoft is to make sure that you have uh, two cloud-only emergency accounts created, which have some permanently assigned global administrator role. And the reason for that is that whenever you deal with cloud accounts, you want to make sure that you have some emergency or break glass accounts ready to be used by only restricted list of people in your team whenever you are locked out of your account or whenever system is not responsive and you need to have a different role or different account to access the system to correct certain things and bring it back online. For those type of things, again, you need to have emergency accounts, which are also called break glass account, and I will give you reference to that so you can learn more about them. Now, let's look at demo of Microsoft Entra ID security defaults and settings in Microsoft Entra Portal. In this demo, we are going to look at Microsoft Entra Admin Center so that you can get some good understanding of look and feel. Then we will look into user settings. What are they? What you can change? What are the options? Then we'll look similarly to group settings and then to the device settings. So let me switch here between the screens and then we'll be back. So here I'm back on the Azure portal. So in order to access the Entra, you need to make sure that you are logged in and you can type entra.microsoft.com. Okay, once you type that, you should end up on Microsoft Entra. If you have the appropriate permissions, you should end up in this Microsoft Entra ID portal. And here in this portal, again, let me show you the address. You need to type Microsoft Entra. You need to type entra.microsoft.com. So once you are in this portal, you can look into roadmap and any changes that happen over the last couple of weeks and months. Then, of course, you are interested to look at user settings. So under the users here, you should be able to see user settings. You can also click on this star to make it a bookmark that so it appears always on, so you can access it much faster. So when you click on user settings, you should get a set of default user role permissions that you can customize, so to speak, by providing access or not. You can get access and see what guest user access should look like. Do you want to have most restrictive or most inclusive or permissive options for them, and then any other options that are applied to the users. Once you're done with user settings, then you can go to the groups and similarly look at group settings. And when we talk about groups, you may have security groups in Microsoft Entra, and you can have also M365 groups. So you can apply this, who can create those security groups. Do you want to give your users actual ability to create those users groups or not? And as well as what's the self-service group management options that you want to enable or disable. Next one is device settings. To see the device settings, you would need to navigate to devices, and then under the devices, we would need to navigate to the overview. And under overview, you should be able to see on the left side under the manage device settings. So this is the device settings that are going to be applied during the Microsoft Entra join and registration settings, where you can change certain settings here. There's a number of them, and there's the maximum number of devices per user, depending on your user or project specifications and requirements. You can change this number of devices and adjust that accordingly. And then, of course, there's local administrator settings that could be enabled or disabled, and as well as you can look at audit to see what were the changes over the last couple of weeks and see if there's any change. So in my case, I didn't do anything in last 7 days, so it's empty, but you can always go back and look at custom time interval as well. All right, that's it. This was the short demo about Microsoft Entra and those default settings that you enable under the user, devices, and groups. Okay. In addition to that, I also want to walk you through some very helpful references and reference articles and materials on Microsoft Learn documentation that you can find it helpful to read through. And this is going to be shared on the slides on the GitHub that I just mentioned. And just to remind it where it is, if you go to the if you navigate to the GitHub under my account, you should be able to find presentations, and under the presentations, you should be able to find Festive Tech Calendar, and then for December 23 session is going to have the slide that has all the links. So let's navigate back to that. Mainly, I have these references to security defaults in Microsoft Entra ID, a starter post on Microsoft Learn. Then there are recommendations how to improve your security posture that are very helpful read to look into. Then if you remember, I mentioned about this break glass account, which are emergency access accounts in the cloud. So I highly recommend to get familiar with that and set it up if you don't have it yet. Then what the ways to enable MFA, what are the options you can provide to your users. And then what's the identity secure score, how to improve that, and what type of recommendations you need to follow to get into better security posture within your tenant. And finally, we have Azure Security Benchmark, ASB, and it can give you some good understanding in terms of what are the benchmark settings that you want to track your organizational security against and get into a better state as a final goal. That said, some of the users some of the customers even talked about what is the way to get hands-on training, because usually Microsoft Entra tenants, some organizations, they lack a development or testing environment. And for those folk, I would say there's a good set of learning and as well as hands-on testing that you can do with applied skills. Here's the screenshot. There are a number of security skills that you can apply. But if you are specifically interested in security-related applied skills, there is one browse under this Learn Microsoft.com under credentials and browsers. You can always go there and then select security here and applied skills, it will give you a number of applied skill modules that you can learn and then verify your skills against. For example, here, if you want to learn more about implementing retention on e-discovery and communication compliance in Microsoft Preview as part of the exercise, you can learn from these modules, and then once you are ready, you will be given 2 hour time to complete assessment, and you can start this assessment by clicking here. But before starting, you want to make sure you have account created here by clicking on sign in and having account. Okay, so this is all what you need, which is great resource again to get up to skill with security skills on different modules and get hands-on skills on how to apply security properly. All right, that's it for Q&A. I think one of the most common asked questions that I get that I get on this session was, what's the difference between Microsoft default, Microsoft Entra Security defaults, and as well as conditional access? There's actually a pretty big difference, but the main difference there is that if you have licenses P1, P2, it's licenses from Microsoft or any business licenses, then it may give you can get more customization and flexibility to apply security settings using your conditional access. So it's going to be more pinpoint. However, if you don't have access to licenses, you can still secure your environment by those fundamental default security settings that are coming with Microsoft Entra ID security defaults. So that's kind of basic differentiation there. And I hope it clarifies certain questions. But if you still have some questions, again, please put them in the comments in the chat, and I will address them once they are visible. So let's wrap up here and see what we learned during this session. This was a bit short session, but to the point of explaining the Entra ID security defaults. So we started with covering what is it and why you would need that. Then we looked into how to enforce security defaults, and then we looked into different deployment considerations that come with security defaults, and as well as what is the way to enable, disable security defaults, and as well as settings on devices, users, and as well as groups, how it could be changed, and what are the options that you have. And finally, we had a small Q&A. Again, thank you for considering my session and being here till the end. Thank you, Festive Tech Calendar organizers, for this great event, continuing and bringing the knowledge to whole community. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to help. Have a great holiday season, everyone, and keep this spirit up. Have a great day. Bye for now.